Hello, I'm Oz Atkins. Well, a couple of minutes after we finished yesterday's show, everything in Egypt changed. The president stood down, the army assumed his powers, and you'll have seen the parties that followed in Egypt's streets and squares. Well, Essam in Dubai Facebook just to say, I'm Egyptian, I'm free, I'm newborn. We've taught the whole world the unforgettable lesson of freedom. And of course, plenty of you are asking, what now? Well, Yusuf in Somaliland answers, an early election will be the best thing for Egyptians. Paul in Bangkok posting disagrees. He says it's best for the military to be in power for a while. And all of you really are asking three pressing questions. Do you trust the army to deliver reforms? What should those reforms be? And is what's happening in Egypt going to have an impact on politics where you live? Well, wherever you're watching, you're very welcome to get involved. Well, in a moment, we're going to be speaking to some of you in Cairo, Algiers, and also in London. But let's begin with a summary of the main news this hour here on the BBC. Western powers have called on the Egyptian armed forces to ensure a peaceful transition to democracy. The military has assumed power, but it's promised not to stand in the way of what the people want. It's also vowed to honour international treaties. Much of Egypt is attempting to return to some degree of normality. Crowds are still celebrating, but they're also busy cleaning up after 18 days of protests. They're not all going home, though. Some groups of activists are warning they won't leave until the military hands power to civilians. Meanwhile, in Yemen, several thousand demonstrators took to the streets of the capital, Sana'a, to celebrate the resignation of Egypt's president and call for the immediate resignation of theirs. President Ali Abdullah Saleh has promised to stand down at the end of his term in 2013, but that hasn't appeased all of his opponents. A court in Pakistan investigating the murder of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto has issued an arrest warrant for former President Pervez Musharraf. Prosecutors say he knew about Taliban plans to target her, but didn't pass on information to authorities. Mr. Musharraf denies the allegations. And the Palestinian chief negotiator, Saeb Erekat, has handed in his resignation, but President Mahmoud Abbas has yet to accept it. Mr. Erekat said he'd step down if it emerged that WikiLeaks disclosures concerning negotiations with the Israelis had come from his office. Well, in a moment, we're going to speak to guests in Algiers and also in Cairo. We can also show you the live pictures from Tahrir Square now. I don't know if you can see those there just in the bottom of the screen. Flags still flying many, many hours after the announcement that President Mubarak was standing down. And we also heard about the cleanup that's going on. So they're not just partying, they're tidying up as well. Let's immediately speak to Mohammed, who's a translator in Gaza City. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What's your reaction to President Mubarak standing down? I understand you're not in Gaza City. I apologise. You're in Algiers, and in which case, let me ask you about the demonstrations there. Mohammed?
Hello.
Go ahead,
yes,
Mohammed. We're listening to you.
Well, I just resumed. I just went back to my office today, and I just left the demonstration sites where basically there's just a handful of people standing there doing nothing. The protesters were there. At a certain time, there was nearly 1,500 people in the streets. The government deployed over 30,000 police officers and anti-riot police. I mean, the number was massive. It was huge, and it was very, very impressive. The repression was there, and people were scared. I saw two people getting injured at the time I was there. I was arrested myself, actually, as well as a lot of other people. We estimated around 250 people that were arrested today. We were arrested just because we were holding banners.
And Mohammed, the figures you're mentioning are ringing true with what our correspondent Chloe Arnold was saying from Algiers, that the protesters have been considerably outnumbered by the police. But do you support their cause? Do you want them to succeed?
I'm sorry, but I had a hard time hearing you.
That's all right. We're going to try and clean up that line, Mohammed, because we'll try and sort that out off air and come back to you if we can. Now, let's bring in Nora, who's an Egyptian who's living in London at the moment. Nora, we've spoken to you any number of times over the past 3 weeks, and on occasions you've expressed concern about what might happen if President Mubarak went very quickly. Well, he's not president anymore. How do you feel about that?
I'm thrilled. This is not how I would have imagined it going. I think him waiting until the end of the term would have been safer. But the call for an orderly transition was just not realistic anymore, given the chaos that was on the street. There was no way it was going to be an orderly transition if this continued for a few months. So I'm very happy with what's going on in Egypt right now. I'm weary of the fact that there are no prominent leaders in view or in sight, but I have all the trust in the armed forces on the ground right now in Egypt.
Why do you trust the armed forces to deliver democracy when they've shown no interest in doing so over the past 50 years?
Well, over the past 18 years, they've refused to shoot Egyptians when they were obviously staunch supporters of Mubarak. They were standing there. They said they wouldn't shoot Egyptians, that they would rather put down their arms and join the demonstrations instead of shooting or restraining the protesters. And I think you've seen a good example of why we believe in them so much and why we trust them.
You're sounding optimistic. Those pictures we can see from Tahrir Square show people certainly in optimistic mood, waving hundreds and hundreds of flags. And if you look on Twitter, people are exchanging tips on how to wear the Egyptian flag as a headband, as a sort of hip statement around the world. Let's bring in another person who's featured heavily on World Have Your Say over the past few days. Shahira Amin is an Egyptian journalist who resigned from the state-run Nile television channel because she didn't want to run pro-Mubarak reports as she was being told to do. Shahira, we hear optimism from Nora, an Egyptian woman in London. Do you share that optimism?
Cautious optimism, because it's a new day here in Egypt and many are very concerned about the future, obviously. President Mubarak had said if he steps down, the country will plunge into total chaos. Now, of course, nobody wants to see that happen. Many are concerned that Egypt may turn into another Iraq. There are lots of concerns. Whether it will be an Islamist state, whether it will be a radical state, so whether the army might try to cling on to power. All these questions are being asked now. But I would rather, put aside all these concerns and look to the future with a lot of optimism. We've seen what Egyptians are capable of doing. It's a near miracle, and hopefully the momentum will be kept in the coming months and years.
Well, Nora and Shahira, let me read you a couple of emails here. Stephen in Hong Kong saying it's way too early to celebrate. The army's been in control since 1952. Fina in the United Arab Emirates saying in the hands of the military you won't be safe. Everything is under the control still of the military. Nora, what do you say to Fina in UAE and Stephen in Hong Kong?
It's a valid point, but what's changed in the last 50 years is that you haven't had people taking to the streets. You haven't had people renew that sense of entitlement, that they have a voice, that they can make a change. And over the last 18 years, the military's been standing there. They've been pro-Mubarak. They've been meant to keep order and arrest people, and they haven't. And it was basically in the hands of the Egyptian demonstrators in Tahrir Square, and this is what's changed.
Just before we give Shahira a chance to respond to you, so many of you watching are phoning up. The numbers scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Do keep trying if we're not picking up. All our lines are full at the moment. We've got calls coming in from the Netherlands, Turkey, Nigeria and Ghana. We'll speak to some of you very soon. But Shahira, let me hear your response to these concerns from our viewers that the army is still in control and that until that changes, Egypt has not been properly reformed.
Well, we heard the anti-regime protesters and their demands, and they kept chanting secular, civil, so no to military rule. And that was the message coming out of these protests over the last 18 days or so. So we hope that this will just be a transitional phase until we are capable of holding free and fair elections. And I know that there are lessons that should be learned from the experience we just had. I don't think that the army will try to hold on to power. This is just a transitional period.
Well, those of you watching will be able to see Nora and Shahira on screen, of course, but also Hichem, who's a blogger in Tunisia who joins us over the internet. Hichem, arguably your country started all of this a few weeks ago. Did you ever imagine it would end up not just with your president leaving, but Egypt's as well?
Well, you know, when things started, we couldn't even believe it was possible to kick out Ben Ali. But now when I see that our dictator is gone, Egypt is gone, in other Arab countries things are moving, I'm very happy to see that for all Arabs across the world who have suffered from dictatorship.
And now we're getting also lots of emails. I saw one from Joe in Texas saying, this is a rock dropping in the pond, now watch the ripples. Nora, do you think that's true? We've seen it shift from Tunisia to Egypt. Do you imagine now that your country will inspire others around the world?
Absolutely. 30 years is a long time to be politically stagnant and not have elections or a voice. And I think what we're seeing right now with demonstrations and marches that are about to take place in Algeria and what's going on in Yemen is a domino effect. And I can't be more excited for the people of Tunisia and Egypt.
It's worth mentioning that the protests in Yemen were considerably bigger than the protests in Algiers. Chloe Arnold, our correspondent in Algiers, saying it really was a couple of hundred young men, while the protests in Yemen were much bigger. Thank you very much for your comments, Nora, also Shahira and Hichem. Of course, we'll speak to you all very soon again. But let's bring in Maged, who's on the phone live here on BBC World News from Cairo. Maged, do you have faith in your army delivering the reforms the protesters have asked for?
Actually, I think the army has been controlling anyway the country since 1952. If you look from a wide angle to what's going on in Egypt since 1952, all of the governors of the different 29 provinces we have, most of them, they are of a military background. If you look to the city councils around Egypt, most of them of a military background. So now the army is in control, yes, but they are actually they have been in control since 1952. So I think the previous status would have been better, which is an order, not disordered, but an order transmission of power, yeah, through what President Mubarak wanted, yeah, within 6 or 7 months. But now the army, I think they are confused. They are not sure about what they are going to do. What's the next step? Are we going to change our constitutional law? If we are going to do so, how they are going to do this without a parliament?
Well, I mean, you raise an interesting point. You say 6, 7 months. There's a lot of debate online about exactly when these elections scheduled for September should take place. If you are online at the moment and want to open up Facebook, if you go to facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay, click on like and you can join the conversation. Ahmed, thanks very much for your contribution on the phone. Nora, Shahira and Hichem, thanks for yours for the moment. And do all of you stay with us here on World Have Your Say. Hello, I'm Ros Atkins. You're watching World Have Your Say on BBC World News. Our guests are still Nora, an Egyptian woman who lives in London, Shahira Amin, an Egyptian journalist, live with us from Cairo. We also have Hichem, who's with us over the internet from Tunis. And let me read you all a couple of messages we've received while we've been on air. Hilda in Norway texted to say, please, Egyptians, you have the key to world peace. Think wisely about the next few months. And Lombe in Lusaka in Zambia on Facebook says, I'm happy for the Egyptians, but the question is, do they know what they want next for their country? So a couple of issues for you there. One about expectation. Let's talk about that in a moment. But first, what should come now? Shahira, do you still want those elections to be in September, or should they be brought a long way forward in 2011?
We're not in a hurry. This should be a gradual process. We're not yet out of the long, dark tunnel. We've seen the light, but it's still further away. There's lots that needs to be done, and we're just taking the first steps on a long and very difficult road. What we need to do is to continue opening up the economy, to integrate women into society and into the economy. Also, what we need is to dissolve parliament, to work on the constitution. The constitution needs amendments, and most importantly, we need a comprehensive re-education campaign. Democracy, Egyptians know very little about democracy. We've been oppressed for a very long time, and we need to be educated. And this is a slow and gradual process. Only then can we be ready for free and fair elections. So if they come in September, we have a lot of work to do before then. We have a leadership vacuum. We need to build up state institutions, and we need to prepare the leaders of the future.
Nora?
I agree with Shahira. I don't think we should have elections tomorrow. Obviously, there are no people that are equipped or are prepared to run an election in Egypt. I have all the confidence in the world in the army. I think they can keep things peaceful until September, until the constitution has been amended, and until people have been educated. And I think that's a very good point that Shahira raises. I think people need to be educated about politics, about voting, about what steps they need to take to be registered and be able to vote, and what they should look for in a candidate.
So Nora, you say wait till September. Shahira does as well. What about those of you watching? Let us know if you think that's the right thing to do. You can comment on facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay. Hichem, do you agree? Let's wait till September, say Shahira and Nora. Do you think that's a reasonable option?
Well, I think let's not even talk about September. First thing is take it, like Shahira said, step by step. The most important thing is to get rid of all the rest of the old regime. They're still here. Mubarak went away yesterday, but he has a lot of faithful people to the old regime. You have to concentrate on that, get rid of the enemies of the democracy, and then think about the date to vote and everything.
Jim, thanks for those comments from Tunis. You can probably see a little kerfuffle there with the live pictures from the centre of Cairo. We'll bring those. There you go. They're back again. A little bit of a commotion. I suppose that's inevitable when you consider how many people are still in the centre of Cairo, not protesting anymore. Some of them are staying there. They say they won't move until the army hands over power to civilians. Others are just celebrating. Others still are clearing up. Hichem, thank you. I know that you've got to go. We're going to bring in Ahmed Mansi in Saudi Arabia in just a moment. But first of all, Shahira, I read out that comment from Hilda watching us in Norway, who said, Egyptians, you have the key to world peace. Doesn't that really highlight the level of expectations that people around the world have for your country? Aren't people going to be disappointed by reality?
I hope not. I hope they won't be disappointed. This revolution, peaceful as it was, has been inspirational to many around the world. What we need to do now is to follow on and make sure that Egypt stays a stable and peaceful country. I know that there are concerns that there may be an Islamist government or perhaps a radical regime. We have the names floating around now, Mr. al-Baradei, who's a pro-reformist, but he's sort of joined the ranks of the Muslim Brotherhood. On the other hand, we have Mr. Amr Moussa, the Secretary General of the Arab League, who is a pan-Arabist, and many are worried that if Mr. Moussa comes to power, he may adopt a tough line with Israel, and he may not be as pro-America as Mr. Mubarak was. So there are a lot of concerns. We just hope that we make this transition to a peaceful democracy. What we want is a civil, secular, democratic state. We need a broad-based government now in this transitional period, one that is representative of all Egyptians, including the Muslim Brotherhood. They should come on board too and be represented, perhaps have a ministerial portfolio. This is everybody's country. We all have a stake here. And this is what I would like to see happen.
Shahira, thank you very much indeed for those comments. I'll ask all of you watching the same question. Do you think there's a danger that expectations about what Egypt can achieve in the next few months are running out of control. You'll see scrolling along the bottom of the screen all the contact details, the text message, the tweet address, Facebook, the blog and the phone number. You can get in touch however you like. In a moment we'll speak to Ahmed in Saudi Arabia, but let's bring in his namesake in Yemen. Ahmed, you join us live from Yemen on the phone. We've been hearing in the news about protests against your president. The president said he's going to go in 2013 at the end of his term. Clearly these protesters don't think that's soon enough. What's your view of their campaign?
Well, in case of Yemen, I think first of all that the Egyptian revolution has a great effect on all Arab, will have an impact on all Arab countries. But it will take that in different actions. For example, in Yemen, it will inspire people to stand more seriously for their rights. It will encourage, for example, the opposition parties, if there is any in these countries, especially in Yemen, to be well prepared and be organized more to lead the people and take them to the streets, and also to have pressure the government toward
but the
more
question I have, Ahmed, is you say you want to apply pressure to the government. If you successfully did that, wouldn't it be better if the president stayed in power, saw out his term, but introduced some reforms? Why does the president himself have to go?
Well, I think the president himself has responded to the Tunisian and to the movements happened in Tunisia and Egypt by providing certain concessions and innovations toward more political and economical renovation.
Let me jump in there, just because the phone line's not the best quality, but thank you very much indeed for speaking to us from Yemen. Do come back on to World Have Your Say again. I can see a message just coming in here from Jacqueline in Germany. She's posting at worldhaveyoursay.com. The real freedom is the freedom one chooses day by day to contribute to the welfare of society, regardless of the form of government or society system. And Abdullahi, who's got in touch from Sudan on Facebook, says, the people have spoken. The treaties signed between Israel and Egypt will have meaning only if they're based on justice. If that's not so, it will all go to hell. Well, the army has come out today saying it will respect all of Egypt's international treaties, including the one that Egypt signed with Israel. Nora, is that a move that you support?
Definitely. I don't think any Egyptian at this point wants to go to war. No one wants to pick a fight with Israel, and I think now that the army has come out and said that they will honor the treaties, then they should stop twitching and reaching for their tanks and looking at the border. I don't think anyone is going to pick a fight with them, and this is the way it should be.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Nora with us live in London. Thanks also to Shahira Amin in Cairo and everyone else who's joined us. I know that Adele was joining us on the phone from Cairo. Maybe Adele, if you can stay on the phone, we'll speak to you on a later edition of World Have Your Say here on BBC World News. Also, if you listen to BBC Radio, tune in at 13 hours GMT on Sunday. bbcworldservice.com is where you can listen to World Have Your Say live. That's 13 hours on Sunday. But for the moment, it's goodbye.